When does Truman actually figure it out?
The Truman Show is about Truman finally figuring out a grand conspiracy, that his life is a fabrication and that everyone he knows is an actor. But when exactly does he figure it out? Over the 20 years I've been a fan of this film, my perspective on this topic has shifted, ultimately taking me to a reading that dramatically recontextualizes the film. There are many moments throughout the film where little nuances in performance, facial expressions, or single words are used to distract, conceal the truth, avoid something, or draw attention. One amazing way to watch this film is to actively imagine it as a kind of spy or detective flick, where everyone is in on the secret, but who's going to give it away? How much does Truman know, when, and what sets him off? The obvious inciting incident is the crash down of a studio light in the street outside Truman's house, right at the beginning of the film. This is actually a part of the story that was always there, that's been there since the very first draft of the script. It's positioned as the first of several weird things that caused Truman to question his reality. Thus begins Truman's own journey of discovery and the beginning of a reactionary phase for the cast and crew of his life as they scramble to make excuses and cover things up. Classical Clive is the first up, lying on the radio about a damaged airplane.
Why does he know? Well, obviously Truman don't know what a studio light is because there's no movies. There's just news, right? And why would he assume it's a set? Like he's been living here his whole life. Does he know?
Clive with Classical Drive, so why don't you forget about the perils of flying?
Fuck you, Classical Clive. There are lots of moments in the film where the dynamic changes and where members of the cast give themselves away, some obvious, some more open to interpretation. This isn't entirely comprehensive, but I'm going to go through a list. The twins Ron and Don and their very noticeable product placement.
And how's your lovely wife?
The ticket guy at the crossing watching Truman to see if he'll actually get on the boat. Basically, anytime Meryl advertises a product and does her advertising voice.
Why don't you let me fix you some of this new Mococo drink?
The rain sequence, where rain selectively falls on Truman for a little bit.
But technically, wouldn't he be used to that? Like, and think that's just how the way the world works? Because he's experienced that in his whole entire life?
Before the rest of it catches up. Lots of moments in the high school flashback, things like the how is it going to end pin, Sylvia not knowing her name, saying that she's not knowing Japanese, saying that she can't talk to him, Sylvia's fake dad, and basically that whole scene.
Konnichiwa.
The radio malfunction on his way to work, the awakening scene with the, iconic music from Dalvitz, with the elevator green room and the traffic and Truman starting to feel like he can control things. Characters checking their watches.
I never understood why now. It's just kind of like he's been living his whole life, not suspecting a thing, and it's just kind of like a hamster wheel, and then stuff just started to happen over and over and over again. Like, I don't know. It's kind of suspicious.
Responding to Truman in normal ways.
It's when I'm unpredictable. They can't. Anything happen? No. Mm-hmm.
His mother being pushy with photo albums to try and, seemingly try and take him off the scent of doctored photos. The travel agent still having her makeup cloth on. The little girl on the bus pointing at Truman and saying, "Is that you-know-who?" before being shushed by another act.
But isn't that just hindsight bias? Like, obviously, these things look clear to us because we know the full picture. We know the full story. But him, he's unsuspecting. He wouldn't notice and pick up on these things because he has been living his whole life just like this. So I would not assume that he would know any of this.
Another actress, the sad bus driver, the police officer using his first name at the power plant, and then the kind of police officer in the next scene leaning in, which I've mentioned, kind of trying to get a peek of the celebrity.
You're welcome, Truman.
Obviously the moment where he's hassling Meryl and she calls out and addresses the crew.
Do something!
And in the heart-wrenching Marlon scene where he says he would never lie to him. That look that Jim Carrey gives in that moment, there is a moment that feels to me, at least, like recognition. His eyes lift slightly, then he turns to Marlon with this kind of horror, The beauty of it, of course, is that it's ambiguous, but to me, it feels like in that moment, Truman realizes he can't trust Marlon. To figure out how much Truman knows and when, you kind of have to work backwards. In the dramatic climax of the story, Truman tricks the cameras and escapes through a hole he has dug leading from his basement to the front lawn. And from there, he makes it to the coast and steals a boat. All of this happens off screen, and by the time we catch up to him, he's already out to sea. I had probably watched this movie at least 10 times when on a rewatch, I noticed something that completely shook my understanding of Truman and the timeline of his escape. Just 9 minutes into the film, after the scene at the dock, Meryl returns home to find Truman gardening.
Hi, honey.
He's positioned on his knees facing away from the camera and doesn't stand up to meet her. She advertises the chef's pal. He says,
"Wow, that's amazing."
She makes a joke about missing a spot and then leaves.
Truman. Missed a spot.
It's a short, harmless scene that illustrates their kind of lackluster marriage. I'd never thought much about it, although I had always found it kind of odd that we have this big shot of Jim Carrey's ass and he stays on the ground the whole time.
Alright, bro.
Then it hit me. He's digging the hole. He's digging the hole. We're not even 10 minutes into the movie, and Truman is executing his escape.
Wait, I was gonna say that wouldn't make any sense. But now that I'm actually thinking about it, how are you gonna dig a hole from your basement all the way to your front lawn in the matter of a night? I always thought, like, how in the heck did he do that? Like, how did he dig the hole? And where did the dirt go? But that would make sense if he already dug the hole. But how wouldn't they know he's digging the hole? Like, what do they think he's doing? Because they're watching him 24/7, right? Interesting.
Plan. This changes everything. With this in mind, I think it's very safe to say Truman knows at least something about what's going on. He suspects things even if he hasn't had them confirmed. He suspects enough to be planning his escape. When you realize this, it kind of flips the table. You're watching Truman try not to give away what he already knows. If you've read articles about The Truman Show, like I certainly have, you might have seen the protagonist described as unaware or oblivious, and he's not. The more I've watched this film, the more I've come to believe that Truman, from the very start, already knows more than they think he does. We see him attempt a few exploratory missions, testing his environment, seeing what he can get away with, but also feeds them misinformation. In a way, after years of not knowing he was living on a stage, we watch Truman finally become a performer. Nothing more beautifully conveys this than when, in the final moments of the film, he recites his catchphrase,
In case I don't see ya. Good afternoon, good evening, and good night.
then takes a bow. The look on his face in that moment is the look of a man who has played everyone. Of course, no single reading of a film or piece of art should be treated.
Did he pre-play them in the past, what, a couple days? Or like, yo, I've been setting this up for years. Like, I already knew. But then again, like, would you want to leave? Would you want to keep going? Would you really just want to see how the true world is? And I always wondered, like, I always hated the fact that they opened the door and then didn't allow us to see, like, what it was like behind the scenes, like how the real world truly was watching this. Well, they did some, but not really. Like, it almost makes you think, like, did they kill him? Because, like, the show is over. Obviously, he knows he's not getting back there. I guess it wouldn't be illegal, but because his parents signed it. It's kind of like he's being held hostage. It should be illegal. Obviously, the government don't care. I mean, he's been there for years. And like, his real parents are actually deadbeats. Like, when you really think about it, Truman real parents are actually deadbeats.
The great thing about good art is that it can and should be interpreted differently by different people. A lot of what I'm reading into comes down to tiny nuances in performance, details that might be happy accidents or just unintentional. If they were intentional, they may have been injected at later stages in the process, such as the power of editing and post-production. They may not have been inventions of the director or of the writer. It's also entirely possible that I've watched this film too many times and I've overthought it, and my theories at this point are basically fan fiction. But I think, dear listener, that Truman knows what's going on before the film even starts. Nowadays, when I watch The Truman Show, I delight in this level of detail and speculation that turns the whole movie on its head. It's at once both complicated and kind of simplified. The entire 120 minutes are Truman's escape, and we're watching everybody else figure it out.
Wow, what a good video.